Hello everyone. In this chapter we will be discussing about the fantasy variation and more specifically about three lines that I consider to be really close to mainline theory. I cannot really categorize them as sidelines, so there's somewhere in between main lines and sidelines, and those lines are Queen B6 in this position. E5 is another one of them, which is the way I called it, the twisted fantasy variation, because it's kind of the same fantasy structure, but it's reversed. As you look at it, it looks kind of funny. And last but not least, we will also cover G6, which maybe this can make it more into the sideline category, but this was played by Alireza Firouzja once against Caro, as you will see. So still very serious stuff that we need to be well prepared against. So yeah, I think we're just gonna be kicking things off with this line, with G6, which is preparing bishop to G7 as you see. And yeah, I mean, there are some players. I want to talk a little bit about this opening in general. So there are some players that go for G6 against pretty much everything. I'm not talking about Alireza Firouzja in this particular case, but my point is that some players like to go knight c3 G6. They play knight d2 G6. They go G6 even against the advance, which is strange because white can go c4 and is much better. But anyways, that is just a fact, and those players are most likely going to play G6 against the fantasy anyways. So against G6, I recommend going knight c3, developing the knight, and after bishop to G7, the important move that you need to remember knight c3 as well. But here, the key move is to play e5, and point is that this bishop now in G7 is restricted by our pawn, and yeah, black does not have a lot of counterplay in the center. As for example, c5 can be met by a very strong f4 move, making room for the knight on f3, developing the knight to the natural square, and also strengthening the center, making just a very tough life for this G7 bishop. So after f4, black has many moves. For example, knight c6 would already be quite a big mistake, as we can just collect the c5 pawn, and after d4, knight e4, bishop f5, white has simply bishop d3. If black takes, can recapture. Black regains the pawn, but after bishop to d2, you have a very nice move here to grab the initiative, which is b4, hitting the queen, and after queen b6, we can just keep going with a4. The pawn on b4 it's still untouchable, because if you take, there will be honest trunk, pinning the knight, and after a5, bishop d3. This is the key maneuver, preparing to get the bishop to b5. Then the enemy king is going to be having a hard time meeting this check. So after e6, we can take on b4 first, and after pawn takes, bishop b5 is very important, making sure that the queen will no longer be defending the b4 pawn. And after king f8, you can just collect the b4 pawn with a rook, with a very nice position for white, as we will be collecting the d4 pawn next. And yeah, I may correct myself and say this is just a winning position and not a nice one. So yeah, knight b4, no bueno. And here black could also play the move a6. But after this, b5 is very strong, opening up the queen side. If pawn takes, we're going to be trading rooks down the a file. But after queen b5, bishop d3 is very strong, kicking the queen. And after queen b6, knight f3, e6, we can just castle. And then the rook comes to b1 really quickly. After knight e7, rook b1 is just going to be winning the b7 pawn very soon with, yeah, winning position for white. And also keep in mind that this one on d4 will be hanging. If queen c7, we can at the very least just take down that one. So knight c6, not really a great move. So a better try is just to take on b4 after f4. But here, we should not be afraid to just recapture with the queen, hitting the d5 pawn. And black has two ways to defend that pawn. One of them is to play the direct e6, which is better. And the alternative is bishop e6. And this was played by both Ali Reza Firouzja and Nodirberk Abdusatarov. So they're very young and promising players using this line. But yeah, I still feel like white should get a very good position after knight f3, knight c6, any important bishop b5, pinning the knight. And now black usually just goes knight h6. Keep in mind that something like rook c8 would just simply drop the a7 pawn because of the pin, among other things. And after knight h6, taking on c6 is very strong. And after pawn takes, really important move, queen c5, threatening to take on c6. If black plays queen b6, it looks like it's getting rid of the queen at first, but white has a very strong move, knight a4, forcing the matters, attacking the queen. If queen takes on c5, we can take with the knight, hitting the e6 bishop, and after bishop g4, knight e4. Just look at white knights on the dark squares. This bishop is out of the game. White is just so much better here. For example, after knight f5, we can just defend our knight with c3, and we're planning to play h3, and this bishop is really gonna be trapped. So yeah, I mean black is just dominated in this position. Instead of going for the endgame, black could also avoid it by playing queen a6. But after this move, b3 is very strong, and something like bishop g4 gets played, then we can just defend our knight. Keep in mind that we cannot really castle. That's really why black has played queen a6. But we can just play queen c3, defend our knight, and after bishop takes, queen takes, black can try to revitalize that bishop on g7 by playing f6. But we can go bishop b2, defending our pawn. And after pawn takes, can recapture, rook f8, hitting our queen, but there is queen h3. And if black is seeking for the queen trade with queen c8, we can simply avoid it by pushing e6. And after the bishop trade, knight f5, we can castle short finally. And if black takes on e6, we can go rook e1. And even though this position is still quite unclear, I think white has a very decent compensation for the sacrificed pawn, and we're going to be getting knight to d3. We're controlling the e5 square. This king is never really that safe, and yeah, I think white just has the easier play. Also keep in mind that this pawn on h7 is hanging, so with that one the g6 will drop as well. So again, I feel like white has full compensation in this position, and with that being said, we can move on to the other line, which is after queen c5, going for castles. Here it's important to not rush with taking that pawn. I mean, the goal of our queen c5 move is more to like blockade black's pieces, because if you just take, that would really play in black's favor after rook c8, and black is just getting so much counterplay now that it's got the open lines. So just do not touch that one and play your castle. Here after rook c8, knight d4, again, it's just like all about the blockade. We don't mind about that pawn. We just really like to keep black's pieces tied down, really passive. And after knight f5, we can eliminate that bishop, and pawn takes bishop to d2, connecting our rooks, finishing development, and we can meet something like queen b6 with a thematic knight a4 with a good position. And if black goes queen c7, then we can continue rook e1. Wait again, very nice position. We can play b3, and then knight a4, queen f2, knight c5 ideas. Also keep in mind there's always g4 to consider, as the f5 knight is getting trapped. So this is very promising for white. And here on queen c5, black could also just defend the c6 pawn with bishop to d7. But we will again just focus on the blockade with bishop e3, e6, knight a4. It's really all about controlling those dark squares on the queen side. And by the way, this game, this move was played by Fabiano Caruana against Ali Reza. So this is really a reference point, although it was an Armageddon game. We get knight f5, bishop f2, h5, queen c3, simply making room for the knight to go to c5. And here Ali Reza, obviously very strong player, very good dynamic feeling. He knows he's already much worse. He tries to sack a pawn with c5, because that's really his only chance to like fight in this game. Because if white just gets the knight to c5, I mean, it's just such an easy game without any risks. Like, If the knight lands on c5, we can continue castle long, then just push h3, g4, and black is never really gonna have any counterplay. So on queen c3, c5 is a very good practical chance. The only bad news is that the position is completely lost, and after knight takes, castles, bishop b5, rook f1. White was completely winning and converted without any problems. Fabiano played like h3, g4 pretty soon and just crashed black here. So yeah, that's bishop e6 line, and with that being said, I think we can move on to what happens if black just defends the d5 pawn by pushing e6. So against e6, we're going to be playing knight f3, and after knight c6, it's really important to drop your queen to the f2 square, because the queen is really nicely placed in this position. And now if you're looking at the pawn structure, it's kind of similar to the French defense. Although, you know, the piece placement is kind of strange this early on into the game if you really try to compare it to a normal French, but usually in the French, white has the bishop on e3 and then plays something like queen from d2 to f2. And the queen is nicely placed on f2. We can play bishop e3. I mean, it's both watching the queen side, and also in case we play like h4, h5, then the queen can join the king side at any time. So it's just very flexible and very nice. Here black plays knight e7, and normally I would be a huge fan of bishop e3, as I said, but the problem is in this case if you go bishop e3, then knight f5 might be quite annoying. So then bishop d2 is just way safer, and after castles, we can castle long, and black has two ways of playing this position. One is to attack on the queen side, and the other one is to strike in the center with f6. If black goes a6, we're going to be playing h4. After b5, we can just go h5, b4. Does not really achieve much since we can just go knight a4, and after queen a5, we can just defend our knight with b3. This knight is really hard to deal with on the queen side, and we already have ideas of taking on g6, playing queen a4, and just going for the mate. So this is quite problematic for black, and it would be a little bit better to break in the center with f6, although white is still getting a really nice position after takes, and now a very important move, white plays h4. Idea to play h5 next, and the king is going to be really weak now. Once we open up the h-file, this is going to be really weak. We can play like bishop d3, watching the g6 pawn. The queen can swing to g3 with all kinds of attacking ideas over the h-file. So yeah, this is just a very good line for white. After e5 though, c5 is not really the only move, and there are some alternatives. Again, like c5, I would really say it's the critical one, but people have also tried to play in different ways, like e6, f6, bishop f5, or even some people tried to play in the Gurgenidze fashion with h5. So we will have a quick look on those as well. If black plays e6, we're gonna be pushing f4, and after h5, this is really the typical move for the Gurgenidze, but problem for black is usually in the Gurgenidze they get this bishop out to like g4, and then they trade it for the knight. And yeah, this is just like a much worse version with that bishop being passive on c8. So we can just play knight f3, meet knight h6 with bishop e3. Now black is usually making this maneuver, but yeah, we're just gonna be playing bishop f2. It's a nice little idea to know. Sometimes playing bishop h4. Anyways, assuming knight f5 will happen, this is still like very useful. So black can try b6, but we can just go queen to d2, and this is not only preparing a long castle, but it's also making room for this knight to go to e3. And after bishop e7, I really like h3, stopping any kind of crazy knight g4 ideas, although in that case we could go bishop g1, but this is just a very useful move in general. Like h3, rook g1, g4 could be always kind of useful for white to go for. And if black goes h4, we can just get our knight to e3. Again, we don't really mind the trade of the bishops. We can castle, and after knight f5, knight e3. It looks like, you know, for the time being, black has avoided the worst. He traded the bad bishop. He managed to trade some pieces, And yeah, sorry about that weird sound if you heard anything. I think someone might have challenged me on chess, but I might have a look on it later. So after queen takes on e3, as I was saying, yeah, it looks like black avoided the worst, but there's actually still quite a big issue with this pawn. The best thing that black can do with the king is probably something like bringing the king to f8 and then to g7, because keep in mind castling short is never really a thing, because queen e1 will just win the pawn basically if you leave that square with the rook. And besides that, I can also just push with rook c1 c4. You can even prepare it with b3, and yeah, white has pressure on both sides of the board without having any risks. So yeah, despite avoiding the sort of worst scenario when sometimes black is getting quickly mated, here black just has a much worse statical position where white can press for a long game. So do not get fooled by the fact that black is doing alright here, because it's not. So instead of e6, black would also strike in the center with f6 in this position, but then we can just play f4, solidifying our center. And after something like knight h6, you could play knight f3 immediately, but I like to be even a bit more trickier, starting with bishop e2. And we're just delaying a bit knight f3, because in that case black will always play bishop g4. And after castle short, knight f3, black gets bishop g4 anyways, and can just castle. And after knight f5, now that black was delaying the trade on f3, we can just avoid it by playing knight e1. And if black does decide to take on e2, there's not really much else to do. We're going to be taking with a knight, obviously. Taking with a queen would have lost the d4 pawn, so taking with a knight is forced. But after c5, important to not take on c5, because that will really weaken your center. But just play c3, keeping a very solid pawn structure. If black takes and plays h5, we can just play knight f3, and again we just have a very nice static position. This knight is kind of active on f5, so we can trade it next with knight g3. And once we do that, we can develop our bishop to like e3, play queen d2, rook c1, and yeah, this pawn is actually pretty weak, and we might keep an eye on it. So white is doing very well. Instead of this f6 move in this position, bishop f5 was also occasionally played, but this is a little bit premature, as white can just gain a tempo by attacking it with g4. And after bishop d7, you can just play bishop e3, e6. You can just go queen d2 with the idea to castle long. And after h5, you can just take it. If rook takes, then f4 is very strong, simply preparing to break the king side with bishop e2, h4, h5 at some point. So if knight e7 gets played, bishop e2, hitting the rook, and then h4, just making sure we are about to push h5, and knight f5 can be met with knight f3 actually, which is a pawn sacrifice. And it's quite impressive because it's showing how strong white's position really is after knight takes, and castle long. Because the idea is that we're going to be playing bishop f3 next. We'll trade off rooks, we'll play rook h1, and then rook h7 is just going to be a really unpleasant threat to face. And yeah, black can never really break with c5 because you can just take. This knight is kind of stuck. You know what is black really going to do? White is simply having all the fun here. And yeah, not so many people are going for this bishop f5. But what you are actually quite likely to face, it's this h5 move, as it is quite common for the Gurgenidze players, as I said. And against it, we're going to be playing bishop to f4. And black has a few alternatives in this position as well. Like, for example, can go for knight h6, can play c5, which is actually a pawn sacrifice. And black can also just go bishop f5 this time because there is no g4 anymore. So starting with knight h6, we will be playing queen d2 with the idea to castle long. And in case of knight d7, then white plays bishop to d3. After knight f8, knight g2, e2 gets played. Bishop f5, we can just continue with castles long. Knight e6, this is usually a maneuver that I've noticed that Gurgenidze himself used to play quite a lot in this structure, but even though it looks kind of fancy, in reality, I don't think it's really achieving all that much when black is doing all this business to get a knight to e6. You can in fact just play king b1, and yeah, knight f4 can be met by knight takes. And if e6 gets played, rook g1 is very solid, preparing g4, and after the bishop trade, we're ready to push g4 in the next move, which is a better position for white. In case after queen d2, black plays bishop e6, we can just castle along, and if knight e7, king b1 is always a useful move, and after rook c8, preparing to play c5. I really like to go queen e1, with the idea that we can mate c5 with pawn takes, but now the e5 pawn is very well defended by both the bishop and the queen, and if rook takes on c5, we can improve our pieces by playing bishop e3, and after rook c8, f4. White has very easy game now, knight f3, bishop d3 to come. This bishop is a little bit misplaced over there. Again, this one's a little bit passive. White is just doing very well in this position. And if the knight takes on c5 here, then we can just insert this check, and after king f8, knight e2, a6 is not really that strong since we can play bishop c4. And now we're ready to collect the d5 pawn in the next move because the queen is pinned. And if black goes after knight e2, queen b6, then bishop d3 is the safest way to play. After king g8, bishop e3, pinning the c5 knight. If black goes queen c7, we can just take on c5 and then play knight f4. And black is having problem to bring this one to the game, and we're also threatening to take on e6 and then collect the g6 pawn. If black goes for the aggressive bishop takes on e5, we have knight a4, exploiting the pin. And after queen d6, you can just take on c5 and then collect the exchange. And once the chaos ends, we can just play c3, make sure that this bishop is restricted, and we're ready to play knight e4 on the next move, which is a nice advantage for white because of the extra exchange. So yeah, instead of knight b7, black could also try to apply immediate pressure on the queen side with b5. But again, that's not really achieving all that much since we can just play h4. And for example, if black goes for something like b4, can just go knight a4, and after queen a5, it's really impressive that white can just go knight c5, and queen takes a2 is not really achieving that much because we can take on b4. And again, there's not really much point in giving queen a1 check because white can just sidestep with king d2, and after knight d7, we can just trade the pair of knights, play knight e2, the knight is coming to c3. Again, queen a1 not really achieving anything because of king d2, and if queen a6 gets played, then knight c3 anyways. And after queen b6, I really like to keep the queens on with queen a3, and we're ready to use this queen as an objective for the knight a4, knight c5 maneuver, and we're going to be using that queen as an objective for this attack, and we're going to be gaining a tempo while doing this maneuver. a5 could come next, but after knight a4, queen b4, a really classy move, c3, forcing the queen trade. And then we're going to be playing knight c5 next with a much better position. So, yeah, as you've seen, this b4 move is not all that problematic. And if black plays knight d7 with the idea to play knight b6, then b4, well, this is just way too slow, since we can just strike on the king side with g4. With the idea being that if pawn takes, we're going to be going h5, opening up the h pawn. And if black takes, taking with the rook is really good here. b4, knight e4, it's very solid. In case of queen a5, we can just defend the knight with b3. And after knight b6. This looks very scary, but there's a simple looking knight c5, and all of a sudden, queen takes on a2 runs into the same queen takes on b4. Simply a winning position for white. It's just absurd how bad this queen on a2 can be right now. And if after h5 black tries the direct counterplay with b4, then we can just sidestep with knight a4, mate queen a5 with same b3, and after g5, this is a very clever move by the way for black, because if black would have been taken here, rook is getting really active and white is just having a devastating initiative. But g5 is actually quite clever, and after bishop takes, black can try c5, but we can just play king b1. If c4 gets played, you take on g4, And after bishop takes rook e1, e6, you can just go bishop h3. And after the bishop trade, we are ready to apply pressure on both the f file and the g file, with a much better position for white. So back on the 6th move after bishop f4, so far we've covered most of the relevant lines after knight h6, and we can move on to this pawn sacrifice connected with c5. So now on c5 we can take, and now notice that the d5 pawn is hanging, so black needs to defend it with e6. But now knight b5 is actually very strong, just directly going for this d6 square. And after knight d7, we don't really need to rush with knight d6. We can just play queen d4, making sure that the e5 pawn is well protected first. And after knight d7, we can go for this check and making f8 with a strong bishop to b5. And this is a very important move because black had a concrete threat of going knight c6, hitting the queen and then winning the e5 pawn. So bishop b5 is very important, with the idea that knight c6 we will be able to take it. And if queen c7 gets played, then we can just take on d7, play knight h3. The knight is heading towards g5. Whenever you see this h5 move, then you want to be sticking a knight to g5 whenever you can, basically. So after b6, you can even give out the pawn because of knight g5. And if black takes, just play queen d2. All of a sudden, black is having a hard time dealing with this threat over the f7 square. So bishop e8 can be played, but c4 is very strong, opening up the position after h4. You can just castle. And believe me or not, after rook e1 and b4, white is just going to be having a crushing advantage. So instead of the c5 move, black can also try bishop f5. But now white can just play queen d2, preparing castling long. And after e6, knight g2, knight d7. I really like the move rook g1, preparing to push g4. And in case of bishop h6, we can just castle long. And bishop takes with knight takes. And after g4, it's really important to go for this nice intermezzo with g4. Now after pawn takes, taking with the pawn, and bishop takes on c2 isn't really achieving much, as we can go for counter intermezzo with knight takes on e6, hitting the enemy queen. After pawn takes, queen takes on c2, white is much better because this king is wide open. And if after rook g1, black tries knight b6, looking for some kind of knight c4 idea, well, just play knight g3, controlling the c4 square and keeping an eye on this bishop on f5. After bishop h6, we can just take it. And if pawn takes on f5, we're going to be trading, then going castle. And the idea is to play king b1, reroute this knight to f4, with just small but steady edge for white in these positions, because always the h5 pawn is going to be quite weak, and black is going to be struggling to find a safe square for his king. So with that being said, we can I think we can wrap it up with this g6 line and move on to the other stuff. Another interesting line that black has after f3 is to go for e5, and this is the so-called twisted fantasy, and it could also transpose via the queen b6 move order. For example, if in this position we're gonna be taking and black plays queen b6, then we can get this from the other one as well. If you start with queen b6, knight c3, e5, you take, and by magic we are into the same position. But we will just look on it individually from the 3e5 move order. And yeah, let me get rid of this arrows so it's not going to be that confusing anymore. And black goes e5, we're going to be taking, and the main line is to go queen b6 followed by bishop c5. It's also playable in a way that it's an option. It's not a great line, but black can also start with bishop to c5. And after knight c3, queen b6 would be the main line, but knight e7 is a way for black to deviate from that. But not a great one, as I was saying, because white can just continue with bishop to d3. And after this queen b6 move, which is a novelty, attacking the g1, we can just play knight e2. And after bishop e2, king f1, black's position is surprisingly bad, because even though have the king on f1, there's simply white is just up way too many tempes, and knight a4 is a huge threat hitting this queen. And we can collect this bishop, and remember that we're also up a pawn after all. So queen b6 not great. Instead, castle a bit better, but f4 is just a very strong move, preparing to play the normal knight f3. And after knight a6, you could play knight f3, but it's even better to just go for the prophylactic a3, stopping black from getting any knight b4, trying to get our precious bishop. So just playing a3, and after queen b6, there's simply knight f3, because bishop f2 does not achieve much after king f1. We lost the right to castle, but you should be pretty comfortable with that by now as a fantasy player. And after d takes on e4, we can take with a knight hitting the bishop, like king of bishop e3. But after the trade, queen e2, queen b6, b4, I mean, we're gonna be just finishing our development next. We can even play something like queen f2 on the upcoming moves, getting rid of the queen, but there's simply there's simply no compensation for black in this position. So yeah, we're gonna be converting our extra pawn slowly. I was kind of missing the word there, but finally it came. So yeah, bishop c5, it's an option, but not the best. So queen b6 really the main move, and after knight c3, bishop c5. This is the kind of critical construction that black has, and now it's really important that you remember this knight c3, knight a4 by heart, because this is really your best friend against this twisted fantasy. And if you don't play it this way, then you might actually experience some problems. So knight c3, knight a4, just remember that it's very high reward variation, because after this black has a lot of problems, as for example in this position, queen a5 followed by c3, bishop takes on g1. This is the main line for black. That is leading to kind of playable positions, as we will see one game played by Alireza Firuzia with black. But there are actually like a lot of players that just go bishop e2, bishop f2, they really like to throw in this check. And then we can just play king e2. I mean, important to not go to d2, because that will be a mate in one. But just go to e2, and their queen is still under attack on b6, so queen d4 is kind of the main line. Queen a6 also has been tried, but we can just take the bishop. Then queen d2 is very strong, with the idea that knight e7 runs into b3, the queen is trapped, and d takes on e4. Can go for the same b3. Now black can save his queen with e3, but anyways, we can just take. And after like queen a5, we're gonna be playing bishop b2, knight e2, get his knight to d4, bishop comes to d3, and the king is just very safe on f2, while we are also up a pawn. So this is just winning for white. And after king e2, queen a5 again queen b5 doesn't really do anything, as c4 just wins. Very nice move, hitting the queen while also defending this knight. And on the next one, we are ready to collect this bishop. So after king e2, queen d4, as I was saying, is kind of the main thing, but if you take, and now you remember that e5 pawn is important, and play f4. White is just much better in the upcoming endgames, as after pawn takes, bishop e3, very strong move, we can trade. Only move to save the e4 pawn is by pushing f5, but after knight e2, knight e7, threatening knight d5, but as long as you play c4, controlling that square, white is just doing very well. After knight a6, really on bishop d7, you can just play a3, prepare to push b4, and then we're gonna be playing knight d4, bishop e2, and then break with g4. Just a very nice endgame for white. Notice how useful this king is in the center of the board. So yeah, bishop f2, just a dubious move, and yeah, black is more or less forced to go for queen a5, c3, and then take on g1, and this is really where kind of the fury starts from this line. Rook takes on g1, and now d takes on e4 is the best move. Knight e7 was also tried, but does connect with a pawn sacrifice, with the idea that after pawn takes on d5, black can take with the knight or with the pawn. If pawn takes, we'll be playing bishop e3, and after knight c6, we will defend our e5 pawn by pushing f4. If black castles, knight c5, we're activating the knight. Play knight b3 on the next move, hitting the enemy queen. If knight f5, hitting our bishop, we can just sidestep with bishop f2. And after d4, it looks like black is generating counterplay, but knight b3 is very strong. And for queen c7, we have another strong move. Another vision took g4, hitting the knight. Knight e3 kind of forced, but we can just take, play queen f3. We will be collecting this e3 pawn, which is a winning position for white. So taking on d5 with the knight would be another option for black here. But after queen d4, very strong move, centralizing our queen. Black castles, and now I really like just playing king f2, as you know, there's no need to go long castle anymore. And yeah, not that it was playable, but there's no need to play for that. That's what I'm trying to say. Do not think that I don't know how to castle long. Okay, I know some of you may be thinking like that, but just go king f2, and if black goes for knight to d7, then just develop the bishop to d3. Knight takes on e5. Does win a pawn, but the upcoming position is still not great for black, as we can just play c4, kicking the knight, and if knight b6, then knight b4, then bishop e4 happens, and then knight a6. You can just play b3, hitting the queen, bring the rook into the game with rook e1, and all the upcoming endgames after queen c5 takes and bishop c2 are just much better for white. A nice threat that black needs to watch out for is bishop a3, b6, bishop c5, pawn takes, and then rook e5 collecting that pawn would be pretty likely outcome. So instead of c4, the knight could also go to f6, but here you can just play bishop g5, developing with tempo, hitting the knight. After queen b4, threatening queen d2 if we take twice on f6, but it doesn't really achieve all that much because there's bishop e2 at the end, and rook e8 can be met by rook e1 and bishop d7. We can simply play queen c3. We don't really mind about the double pawns, as we are up an extra pawn on the king side. And yeah, you can play bishop d3. Trading both rooks would be really beneficial for us, as all the bishop endgames are just winning. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it about knight e7, and we can now move on to the main move, d takes on e4, which is what also Alireza Firuza has played himself against Wei E. So here on d4, best move for white, and really my main recommendation, bishop f4, really important move to remember. And after knight to e7, you're going to be playing b4. And this has a very deep point that if black plays queen c7, the position is already becoming quite miserable after queen d6. Because if black takes, we're going to be taking with a pawn. The knight has to move. Then we play bishop g3. And yeah, we're going to be castling long. And then the knight comes to c5. This bishop goes to c4. This pawn is really annoying. And it's just really painful to play this as black. But after b4, a much better move for black would be to play queen d5. And in this position, white just goes knight c5. Hitting this pawn on e4, and black has a choice between going knight g6 or taking on d1. If knight g6, we can just sidestep with bishop g3, and if pawn takes on f3, we can take on d5 first, and after pawn takes, we can recapture. After castle short, we can just go long castle, and yeah, have pressure on this d5 pawn. We have the bishop pair. We have many reasons to be very optimistic about the future here. So yeah, taking on d1 is a bit better though, as played by Alireza. And after rook takes on d1, knight d5, the key idea that you need to remember is to combine this bishop g5 move, pretty much keeping the d8 square under control. So if knight c3, then rook d8 would be slightly problematic. And if black plays h6, you have this very important intermezzo. We're taking on e4. And again, the knight cannot move because of the checkmate. I mean, it can go to e7, but that's still worse than taking on g5. So we're not going to be looking into that. And yeah, what black can do is take on g5, but we will happily take the knight. And if black goes knight d7, with the idea to take on e5 with the knight, we can throw in e6. And if knight takes on c5, we can just collect. And after cd, take on f7. Again, really important intermezzo. If king takes, rook d5. The g5 pawn is dropping as well. And in this position, after rook h2, bishop d3. A lot of pawns are dropping. White can still play king f2. And I feel like we still have slightly better endgame because of the super active rooks. And yeah, even play maybe c4. Keep this bishop out of the game. And yeah, I still feel like white should have some pressure, even though a lot of material has been traded. So after e d5, c d5 is the main move, and after rook d5, king e7, bishop c4. We will see some really instructive play by Wei Yi as white. Rook takes on h2 can also be a move here, but rook f1 is very strong, with the idea that after knight c6, we will have this brilliant rook d7 idea. Literally just putting the rook on pre, and if bishop takes, we can take on f7. After king 8, can take with a knight. White is just much better because of these threats of playing rook f8, collecting the rook, but also just pushing e6, followed by rook f8. So, yeah, this is just very painful for black. And if after bishop c4, black plays knight to c6, here again, same idea. Rook f1 and bishop e6. This was slight inaccuracy by Alieza, probably missing this brilliant rook d7 idea. But yeah, if rook h2, this was a bit better. Same things would have happened after knight e7. White still has very nice compensation with e6 and rook f8 to come. But would have been slightly of an improved version for black. But in the game we have rook f1, bishop e6, rook d7, as I was saying. After bishop takes king a8, knight d7. White was yeah, already clearly better in the game Wei Yi against Alireza Firouzja on Chess 24 in 2020. Even though the game ended in a draw, Alireza somehow managed to survive, but he is very well known for his resourcefulness. So yeah, kind of doubt that your opponents will if you get to this position. So yeah, with that being said, I think we have pretty much covered everything that you need to know about this twisted variation. And yeah, again, I just want to quickly sum things up and say that as long as you remember to take on e5 and meet queen b6 with knight c3, just think about it this way. When black is getting queen b6 and bishop c5, you want to be able to meet it with knight a4. I don't know how you do it, you just want to have knight a4 there, okay? As long as you do that, then you should be good to go. And yeah, white is having quite a nice edge if you follow my recommendation. So yeah, we can just move on to this other line that I've prepared for this chapter, which is queen to b6. And the storyline with this queen b6 move is that it's kind of an interesting move. It's really just trying to say that, well, that diagonal has been weakened now that he played f3, and it's also kind of flexible for black in a way, because you don't really know whether black is planning to play with e6 or with e5. You don't really know what black is really up to. It's really kind of mysterious move, and yeah, but we're just gonna be playing knight c3. Again, the idea is that if e5 gets played, we just wanna be able to meet bishop c5 with knight a4, okay? So that's what we're doing. But yeah, e5 doesn't really achieve much since we can just transpose to the twisted fantasy, and black really has two main ways of playing this position. One of them is to go e6, and the other one is to take on e4 here. And if black takes on e4, I really like to not go for pawn takes, because that's going to be met by e5. But instead I just like to gambit the pawn here, as we usually do in this repertoire, by playing bishop to c4. And I think white is getting a very interesting play for the sacrificed pawn. But we will come back to those lines a little bit later, as I think it's better to start by looking on the e6 move. And here we will be playing a3, preparing to develop the bishop to e3 and meet queen takes on b2 with knight a4, trapping that queen. And here black has many ways of developing. Knight d7 is the main move, and there are also knight e7 or knight f6 available. If knight f6, we will be happily taking that knight with e5 after knight e7, f4, we're preparing to get a knight to f3 and just get a somewhat better version of the French defense. Because after c5, knight f3, knight c6, take on c5, and mid bishop takes with knight e4. You already know by now. When you see this, just go knight a4, okay? Pretty easy. So after queen a5, we're going to be playing c3. Now notice that b4 is a huge threat. So black has to drop the bishop to e7. But now we can still go for it. And after queen c7, we can play bishop d3. And we're going to be castling short. Play bishop to e3. With just a very nice, typical kind of French position. And yeah, it's just a slightly better version because we gain a lot of space on the queen side. And yeah, you can also like reroute this knight, push this pawn all the way to a5, and whenever black will break with f6, that's going to be like a really weakening move, so it's going to be always double-edged. So yeah, knight f6 is just leading to some kind of French structures. Black can play knight e7 as well, but this is a little bit of a bad square for the knight in a way that it's not so flexible, and it gives us the time to just push f4. I really like this move. And after pawn takes on e4, can take with a knight. And if knight f5, knight f5, hitting the d4 pawn, we can play knight f3. And after bishop e7, just g4. This is super strong here. Kicking the knight. In case of knight e4, you can just ignore that by playing bishop to d3. And yeah, the point is that if black goes for the pawn, you can just go bishop e3, gaining another tempo. If black goes really greedy, taking on b2, we can just castle. No, it is completely winning. We're going to be playing queen f2, followed by bishop d4. And yeah, we just have a full development for only 2 pawns. And black's queen is struggling to come back into the game. So white is just winning. And yeah, knight e7, just remember this f4 idea and should be good to go. But what is really the main move? So e6, it's to play knight to d7. And this is kind of a tricky one because here we're going to be playing bishop e3. This is really important. That's the point of having played a3 on the previous move. And please notice that queen takes on b2 will drop the queen after knight a4. The queen is literally trapped, has no squares. So taking on b2 would not really be that advisable. And instead, after bishop to e3, the main move that black has, it's going for knight g f6. But before we cover that, I will also quickly mention this mysterious knight e7 once again. So we will be playing bishop to d3, and black can either go g6 or knight g6. In case of g6, we can just play queen c1. Notice that we want to be able to meet bishop g7 with e5. But if we would go e5, for example, now there will be all kinds of knight e5 tactics because pawn takes runs to queen e3. So queen c1, we are defending our bishop, and now after bishop g7 we can safely play e5, locking this bishop here. And if black tries to open things up with c5, we can just take, and in case of knight takes, bishop b5 is strong. Very annoying check for black to meet, king f8, but now f4 is just a very nice move to make. Killing the bishop on g7, and after knight f5, you can just side flip with bishop f2. Any case of d4, you can just go b4. And yeah, taking the knight is not possible, because that will allow bishop takes on c5, winning the queen. And in case of knight e4, you can just take it, and if queen takes on b5, knight f3, this pawn is dropping soon, and white just has clearly better position. So after dc5, another way of playing for black is to play queen c7, but yeah, you can just do the same, play f4, defend the e5 pawn, after knight takes. You can play knight f3 this time. No need to play bishop b5 anymore, because we're not really afraid of knight takes on d3, because it's going to give us a typical French advantage, as you will see. We're going to be castling, and after knight e2, this is a very strong maneuver, by the way, for this French starter. We're just preparing to get a knight to d4, rook c8, knight to d4, after knight e3, cd3. We're very happy with this structure because all the endgames are slightly better for white, as we're having this good knight against bad bishop scenario. So yeah, that should be pretty much it about the c5 break, and Black could also castle short, but here it's really strong to just play knight e2, preparing to meet c5 with c3, as you are already familiar with by now. And if black breaks with f6, simply gonna be strengthening the sender even further with f4, and black simply has no counterplay. So knight f5, just drop the bishop to f2. We will play knight f3, followed by castles. Then we will keep this knight with g4, with just an overwhelming position. So white is just so much better here. And with that being said, I think we can move on to bishop d3, and now knight g6 by black. But here, I have a very strong move. I think you already know it by now. Whenever you see that knight on g6, h4 is always at least to be considered. But here it's also the best move. And after h5, you can take on d5. And if pawn takes on d5, then bishop takes on g6 happens. I mean if c pawn takes, bishop g6 happens. And then queen e3, hitting the g6 square is really problematic, as knight g2, after something like king f7, knight g2 to f4 will come, and black will have a hard time defending that one. So e5 is a bit better, but the same issue remains, as we can just take on g6, play queen d3, and after king f7, knight h3 just becomes even more annoying, as bishop e7 runs into simply long castle, and knight will go to f4. We will push g4, and black is just getting destroyed on the king side. So yeah, knight e7, not really the greatest move in that position. This is why most of the players are going knight f6, and this is kind of setting up a nice trap, in a way that, you know, the lesser experienced players will just go e5, and that's really dropping the pawn after knight takes. As if you take with this, then queen takes on b6 happens. I mean, queen from b6 takes on e3, that happens. So yeah, but I prepared a counter trap for you. We're gonna be playing bishop e2, and point is that if bishop e7 gets played, well, we're playing e5 this time, and guess what? Knight takes e5 is no longer working, as queen takes e3 does not come with a check anymore, and that gives us the crucial tempo to take on f6 and win a piece with a completely winning position. Something like takes can trade queens, and white is just winning. So yeah, after bishop e2, there's a massive threat of going e5, so black really has to do something about it. Therefore, e5, c5, or d takes on e4 are the better alternatives. But after e5, I really like to just play queen d2, defending this e3 bishop, and we're threatening to take on e5 with a very unpleasant discovery. And I've covered many moves for black in this position. If queen c7, for example, we can take on d5, and now surprisingly strong move is g4, with the simple threat of going g5, undermining the knight. I mean, undermining the d5 pawn by hitting the knight. And yeah, it's very hard to play. Black can go h6, but still knight b5 is really annoying. And after queen c6, we can take on e5, and then just collect the a7 pawn. And I know the position is like a little bit strange, but it's a it's a strange but good position for white, as we're simply up a pawn. It's much better to be in strange good positions than being in strange but bad positions, objectively speaking. So yeah. After queen d2, queen a5, another move, but we can take on e5 this time, and after knight takes, we can take on d5. If knight takes, we can just trade everything, and white has a very nice edge against the isolated pawn. And after queen e2, taking on d4, followed by c5 is another alternative for black, but here we can just take on f6, and black is really underdeveloped here after bishop b5, and yeah, black has to like block the check, but we can take and then collect on d5 with just a much better position. After queen d2, black would also go for this queen takes on b2 move that is generally pretty risky, but now knight a4 is no longer available, as the rook on a1 is hanging. But we can play rook a2, and now we're hitting this queen. Queen has to go back to b6, and now we can take on e5. This looks like should be winning by force. Black has this trick with d4, but we can still just take. And after c5, this is the trick. We can just play bishop f2. And we're no longer winning the piece, but white is keeping a very nice position after bishop g3. And we are ready to push f4, followed by e5. Then we can go knight f3, castle shot, with just a much better position for white. So yeah, I think that's it about what happens if black goes for this madness with e5. It looks kind of terrifying at first, but just queen d2, and white is just much better developed. So no need to be afraid of that. Just be aware of it, not afraid. And if black plays c5, then we can just play queen d2, and queen takes on b2 would be quite a big inaccuracy here, as queen takes on a3 allows knight b5. Black can play queen a2, hitting our rook, but there's queen c1, very important. And we can meet queen a5 with bishop d2. And after queen d8, we have this key move with bishop f4. And all of a sudden, there's a big problem connected with this knight c7 frat. Black can still try e5, but after pawn takes a6, we have a very strong move, pinning that pawn with rook a1. This is really the final touch, and after knight h5, we can just open up the diagonal for our bishop, go e6, introducing knight c7 ideas. Already black has to take on b5, but we can just collect the exchange and then play knight h3 with just a much better position. We can castle on the next move, and yeah, white is doing very well. Instead of taking on b2, black can take on e4, but after pawn takes cd4, bishop takes on d4, black can play bishop c5. If queen c7, we can just develop our knight with knight f3, and after e5, bishop e3, bishop c5, have a very strong maneuver. We can play knight h4, heading towards f5, and after castles, knight f5, bishop e3, can take with a queen. And yeah, white is doing very well. We're going to be castling long, and then just advance these pawns with very unpleasant attacks. Keep in mind all kinds of g5 followed by knight d5 jumps that can be deadly. So after bishop d4, a bit better would be to play bishop c5, but still after the important knight e4, again, when there's queen b6, bishop c5, knight e4 is really the way to go. And now after queen c7, we can take on c5, push e5, hit the knight, and after knight d5, just go knight f3. If castles, we can take on c5, go c4, hit the knight, and after knight e7, we have this really juicy queen d6 move, forcing queens off, and it's going to be really unpleasant for black to deal with that passer on d6. So yeah, c5, just play queen d2, and make sure to meet this queen b2 move with rook b1, and should be good to go. And now we can move on to the main line of this queen b6 move, which is taking on e4 and then playing bishop e7. Here the key move is to play knight h3, because knight f3 would allow all kinds of knight g4 ideas. And here, queen takes b2 is again like really bad after knight a4. Black is just losing the queen, and e5 is really the main move here. This is the way to go for black, but you can just play queen to d2, after which black usually plays queen to c7. Queen takes b2 is running into this rook a2, queen b6 taking on e5, and because of the double attack, black is losing a piece. So queen c7 is better, but still after d5, I just really like this move, creating this very annoying passer. I can play bishop c5, but after castles long, cd, ed, queen b6, there's a very cool move to keep the tension. We're just going to be playing bishop to g1. We're not going to take on c5 and activate black's knight, but we will be waiting for black to trade, and then play knight c5, and now we are able to bring the knight into the game with knight f2, and after bishop d7, we can just play knight d3, and after this knight trade, we are ready to push g4, followed by g5, with a very nice advantage in a correspondence game played between Alonso against Rufanacht. That's very that's a very German name. Sorry for butchering his name. I'm not very good at German names, but you get the point. You can look out for this correspondence game played in 2012, where White was doing very well. And with that being said, we can move on to the other line where after knight c3, Black does take on e4. And here we're going to be going for this super tricky lines with bishop c4, and the idea is that we're inviting Black to basically take on f3, because that's going to give us a really nice compensation. And we will start by looking at those lines, although there are many alternatives for Black, like e5 is a move here, e3 is a move, knight f6 is a move. But again, I feel like it's just so natural to take on f3, and that's why we're going to covering it now. So we take with a knight, and after knight f6, White castles. Black normally plays e6. There are two traps that I want to show you here. Bishop g4 is a very common blunder in these positions, where White can just take on f7, and after king takes knight e5, king g8, can take on g4. White is just much better. There's equal material, but this king is so weak. And another very similar idea is after bishop f5, we can take on f7, and if king takes, we can play knight e5, hitting this king, and it looks like the king can still defend the bishop, but there is rook takes on f5, and after king takes, queen f3, king e6, queen h3. The black king is getting mated really soon. King d6 runs into knight c4, and so on. So yeah, after this, e6 turns out to be safest way for Black, trying to limit the activity of this bishop on c4, but just play this prophylactic king h1, and after bishop e7, knight e5, castles, bishop g5, and yeah, there are a few alternatives for Black in this position. Although if you made it to this point, White just has very nice compensation. But just so we can get a little bit more familiar with how the play could go, I decided to go a little bit deeper. And for example, Black could play queen d8 with the idea to protect the e7 bishop. This is quite important because against knight bd7, we have a very interesting knight e4 move, which is basically putting the knight en prise. But then we're using the fact that this bishop on e7 is quite loose. So this is why I came up with this queen d8 move, because it might look a little bit weird to you that Black is just moving the queen back like that. So after queen d8, we'll just play bishop d3. Notice that taking on d4 won't be possible because of this cute tactic. And after bishop d3, Black normally plays g6, but now bishop a6 is strong, and after rook 8, queen f3. Again, very strong move as queen takes on d4. Only grabs the pawn, but White manages to bring another piece into the attack. That's a knight b to d7. We can just take once, and after bishop takes on e-move, we can play knight e4. And we're simply going to be winning a piece, as knight takes on e4 runs into queen takes on f7. That is no good. So White just wins here. Therefore, knight b to d7 is a bit of a better move. But as I said, knight e4 is the key idea that we will be using here. And if the knight takes on e4, we'll be collecting that bishop on e7. And if Black goes for this kind of tempting idea to take on e5 followed by knight f2, you can just take on f8, and we're just up a clean piece, as there's a small issue with king takes on f8 because there's queen to d8, checkmate. And instead of this, Black could also play rook e8, but that allows bishop to back to h4. This is really nice because after knight takes on e5, d takes on e5, the f2 square will be covered. So knight f6 would be a bit better, but just queen e3 by White, and after rook d8 hitting the pawn, just play c3. And we're gonna be bringing this rook into the game next with just a winning position for White, because the bishop is unable to come into the defense, and Black just has massive issues on this pin. So after knight e4, Black can also try the move queen to d8, but now we can just take on f6. After knight takes, we can reroute our bishop with bishop to d3. Again, queen takes on d4 is not possible because of bishop takes on h7. And after h6, we have some very beautiful attacking play. After bishop takes, pawn takes, Rook f3 is very strong, switching the rook to the enemy king side. And yeah, black is just unable to defend here. For example, king h8, can play queen d2, hitting the h6 pawn. After knight g8, can just take on f7 twice. And white is simply winning, because black is going to be mating really soon. And if after rook f3, black plays knight e8, then rook f7. It's a very beautiful move with the idea that we can take twice on f7. Bring the queen with tempo. After king f8, can take on h6, knight g7. Bring the last piece with check, king e8. Go queen g6. Again, a cute move. After king d7. We can take. And yeah, I mean, we're still down a piece in this position, but simple threat of advancing this one is actually really hard to stop, while there are also all kinds of rook f7 ideas to put pressure on this bishop. Just look at this two, unable to during the game. So white is very close to winning here as well. And with that being said, I think you got a pretty decent idea of how to play. I could continue in this positions, yeah, where we are sacrificing a pawn, but we get a lot of pressure on the f-file. So yeah. Going back to bishop c4, black can also play e5 here, just striking in the center, and now we will be taking on e5 with a pawn. And there are a few ideas here, as for example, knight d7 runs into e6, very strong move. If pawn takes, we can take on e4 with just a better pawn structure. Queen b4 looks like he's winning the bishop, but we can just play knight d2 defending it, and after knight b6, queen e2. If takes on c4, another nice move to insert as the c3, and then we can recapture on c4 with a better position. And if black plays knight f6, we're going to be playing c3 again, and after queen e7, knight h3, we're just preparing to castle short, and after e5, keep in mind that this becomes a threat now, so knight f2 is needed, but after bishop f5, short castle, long castle. Really nice move to start the initiative, just going a4, the idea to push the pawn all the way to a6, with really annoying the initiative on the queen side. So instead of knight d7, black would also try bishop e6, but that's simply bad after bishop takes on knight e4, and white is just up a pawn. And the trickier move is actually bishop c5. And yes, I know I said when bishop c5 and queen b6, you're going knight a4, but this is no longer the case here, as queen b4 will be quite problematic hitting both pieces, and instead have a kind of a similar idea in a way that we're giving up the g1 knight by playing knight takes on e4. And main point is that bishop takes on g1 allows knight d6, and if black plays queen b4, we will drop the knight to defend the bishop to d2. After queen b6, there's no need to repeat, so we can just play knight e2. And if bishop f2, just go king f1, knight e4 next, and white is just much better. And if black plays knight e7, we can go c3, knight g6, hitting the e5 pawn, just f4, defending everything, knight h4, again just very cold-blooded move, king f1, defending the g2 pawn. After castles, we can activate with knight e4, and if bishop e7, we can play queen c2, if bishop e6, we can simply just take it. There's nothing happening on the f-file, as g3 gets played, and after knight f5, king g2, white finally manages to coordinate the pieces, and we're up a very clean pawn. So it is just close to winning. Instead, after knight takes on e4, the more interesting part comes when black takes on g1, and we're going to be playing this knight d6 move. That is really the key. We're going to be playing for this counterplay on f7. After king f8, though, it's really important to start with queen e2, because you don't want to be getting checkmated with queen f2. So queen e2 is important to start things off, and I've covered many moves here for black. If knight e7, we'll be playing c3, taking away the d4 square, and after knight a6, we can get rid of that and then play knight c4, hitting the queen. After queen c5, b4, black is no longer able to defend that g1 bishop, and after queen d5, we can collect it, and we are up clean pawn with a winning position. So instead of knight e7, knight a6 can also be tried, but then king f1 is strong, attacking the bishop, and after bishop c5, we can just take on f7 after knight e7. The rook is free in the corner, waiting to be taken. Case of bishop e6, you can just go bishop d3, hitting this h7 pawn, and after g6, we can just activate the rook with h4. Again, it really doesn't matter the fact that we haven't castled, because the rook is activating via h4, h5, and our king is still like very safe on f1. So this would be again completely winning for white. The main line after queen e2 goes bishop e6, but now we can take on e6, play knight c4, hitting the queen, and after queen c5, you can just play b3. This is a very cunning move because bishop a3 is now a huge threat, and in case of bishop d4, this is actually quite a funny resource, as bishop a3 runs into this check and then bishop b4, and black manages to save the queen. We have this very strong queen d2 idea. Now keeping an eye on the bishop and reinforcing this bishop a3 move. And if queen d5, we can go for the check, and after c5, queen f4 is strong, king e8. But we are in time with long castles, and black is dead lost, as c3 is a huge threat because of the pin. Instead of this bishop d4, black can also try b5, but after bishop a3, b4, we can just castle long, and pawn takes on a3. Runs into rook d8 check. If black plays king e7, then queen d2 is deadly, threatening king g5. If h6, we can just play c3. And black's pieces are completely stuck right now. It's really hard to make any moves as black. And yeah, we're threatening all kinds of nasty stuff here. And I mean, literally just try to make a move with with black in this position. It's like really hard. Yeah, with that being said, I think we can move on to the next line, which is in this position. Instead of going e3, instead of going e5, to play e3. And after e3, this is a nice try, because if we take, then b2 hangs. So just don't take immediately, but do play bishop b3 first. And then we're ready to collect that pawn on e3. And the play could go into some interesting directions here. So for example, bishop f5 runs into this super aggressive bishop e3. And then after e6, we're going to be playing this g4 idea. I think going g4, by the way, in this position is also quite interesting, but it's just a bit better to take on e3 first with the bishop. After e6, just go g4, bishop g6, knight g2. Idea is to play knight f4 and h4. Those two are usually nicely combined. After 97 though, we're going to be playing queen d2, long castle, after 97. We can go h4, threatening to pin, to trap the bishop, and if h5 gets played, knight f4. It's very strong. Pawn takes on g4, but we take on g6, winning the bishop pair, kicking the knight with h5. After 97, we take on g4 in the optimal version. If knight d5 gets played, just take it with the knight. Go g5. We just have a very annoying passer on the h5. We can push h5, h6 at any point, while we also have annoying pressure on the f file. So white is just doing very well. Also keep in mind that we have the bishop pair, which is always a nice asset. Instead of this, a bit more natural is to play knight f6, but after bishop takes on e3, e6, I really like to just play f4, preparing to develop the knight to f3. And after castles, you can castle, knight b7, queen e2, and yeah, blacks, look at this bishop. I mean, it's just stuck on c8. This is not really how the Caro Kann players are playing the Caro Kann. This is more like a French player on the side, on the black side here. But yeah, the game could go like knight d5. We can just take again, play c3. We're gonna be rerouting this bishop via c2. Knight f6 can be met with knight e5, and then we can continue with like bring this rook to h3, go g4, g5. Just very nice attacking play. So e3 again, there's quite little theory to know. Just do not take on e3 immediately, as that will drop the b2 pawn. Just play bishop b3 first, take on e3, then, and yeah, if black plays with knight f6, take on e3, play f4, so you can develop your knight on f3. If black tries to play with bishop f5, then be a little bit more creative and consider attacking it with g4 after bishop takes, as that is winning a few tempis. So with that being said, we can advance to the last major line that we will cover, which is connected with knight f6 in this position. And the idea of this is that after pawn takes, black plays e5. This is really how black will combine these two moves. I think this is one of the best reactions, objectively speaking, that black has. And this is really like the only move in the position, as bishop g4 is really leading to a big edge for white after bishop e2 and bishop takes. Queen takes is a very interesting pawn sack. Because if black does not take, we're going to be playing knight f3, then going to be going short castle with just a very nice pawn center. So black has to take, but after knight f3, queen b6, can go e5, hitting the knight. After knight e5, just play knight e4. After something like e6, just play a3, with the idea to play c4 on the next move, while not allowing any knight b4 / bishop b4 checks. And then we're going to be pushing c4 once the knight goes away to like e7. Play bishop e3. I mean, knight d7, knight d6 will also be a move there. So let's assume, I don't know where the knight can really go, but then bishop e3 will come anyways, hitting the enemy queen. That's really the point that I'm trying to make. So white is very much in business here. And yeah, e5 really the main move here that we will be focusing on. We will be taking, and now knight g4 is the idea, hitting this e5 pawn and also threatening to mate on f2. Now we will play queen e2, defend against that threat, and main move is knight e5. Bishop c5 is a little bit too aggressive now. Yes, we will lose the right to castle after knight f3, bishop f2, but as you know by now, this is not really a problem in the fantasy. As knight e3, for example, is one of the best lines that black has, where we can just take and go knight a4. After queen b4, a3, hitting the queen. Queen can take the knight, but now we managed to defend our c4 bishop with tempo by playing b3. Then we can collect the bishop, and we are up a pawn. And if the game goes like castle short, we can play king f2. And yeah, we're up a pawn. I don't really see much compensation with black. Can bring the rook into the game next with like either rook e1 or rook d1. I was thinking to bring this one to e1 and then the other one to d1. We could also consider arranging our rooks like rook f1, king g1, and then rook d1. But we have to, also keep an eye on this one. So, yeah, I think white is doing very well here. And it's just better for black to take on e5. We will play bishop b3, of course. We never allow this kind of knight takes on c4 moves. So, bishop to b3. Bishop g4 hitting our queen, but we can develop with knight f3, knight d7, and then bishop d2 is a crucial move, preparing to castle long. Keep in mind that bishop e3 was also another candidate, but black would have been playing bishop c5 with a fine position, so I just like bishop d2 better. And here, bishop b4 is an alternative. I think long castle is the main move, as I consider it in my notes. If bishop b4, can just castle. The idea of this bishop b4 is to be playing for opposite castles, but I feel like white is getting really nice play in the upcoming positions after a3, bishop e7, king b1, and if knight c5 gets played, can go bishop e3, in the case of queen c7, h3, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Yes, finally black can eliminate that bishop, but after knight g6, h4, white seems to be really the one grabbing the initiative, as we're heading to push h5, and whenever black does go for something like knight takes on h4, that will just open up a lot of lines for our pieces. So I really like white's position here. And after bishop d2, safest way for black to play is castles long, and here we will be castling. And in case of bishop e7, I like the prophylactical king b1, rook e8, h3, attacking the bishop. I'm going to be pushing g4, and after bishop g6, h4 is just a nice move to make, as knight g4 fails because of h5, and I think white has a tiny bit of pressure on the king side in this position. And after long castle, super precise would be to play bishop h5, with the idea that after king b1, black plays bishop b4, and after a3, I think taking on c3 is a decent try for black. Going bishop a5 would be a little bit more stubborn, but can play knight a4, hit the queen after queen c7. Queen e3 is a strong move, hitting the a7 pawn, and if black does take on d2, can collect with the rook. And if king b8, defending that one, we can bring our last piece into the game. Rook to d1, and if f6, we can go bishop to e6. And now we are finally activating that bishop, as it wasn't really doing all that much anymore. In case of rook e8, now we can trade on d7, and now we have this very strong takes on e5, hitting d7, like has to take on d2, and then take with rook on e5, play knight c5, bishop g4, and now b4. And even though this was nor a forcing line or any kind of mainline theory, I feel like again this is a good illustration of how the play could go. If you just remember to get to these positions after lone castle, I think you should be fine. But yeah, remember that you can go for this bishop a5, knight a4 ideas, queen e3, and then double up your rooks. Just don't fall for this thing that the bishop might remain out of play here on b3. So it's a good idea to just trade it for the knight now, and then you can activate with knight c5. And after b4, yeah, it's an interesting position to play. I think should be around equal, but maybe a little bit easier to play as white, because the knight is a tricky piece, as they say. So yeah, after a3, taking on c3 is what I consider to be the main line here, and black plays f6, defending e5. Or you can go bishop e6, and after rook e8, bishop f5, hitting h7, g6, bishop h3. I feel like we are slightly better here, as we will double up on the d file. And black has a little bit of a weakness here on f6, although the position is still pretty solid. So yeah, with that being said, I think we have finished all the coverage on this d takes on e4 move, followed by bishop to c4. Again, before we wrap up this video, I just want to quickly remind you to avoid falling for these tricks after e6, a3, knight e7, bishop e3, knight f6. Just remember this trap. I see so many people falling for this. e5, you don't want to be playing it because of knight e5. But do play bishop e2 first, and then e5 is actually a real thing. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that it improved your fantasy and understanding quite a bit. And before going into your games, I highly advise you to use the move trainer as your main tool, as your best friend while working with this course. And I think that will just improve your learning experience by quite a lot. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the upcoming chapters. So take care.